What's going on, YouTube world? Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all to another episode of Wayne's Perspective, where we operate in discipline, decency, integrity, and respect. On this Saturday afternoon, I hope everyone is doing okay. Taking every day one day at a time and just enjoying things the best way you know how. And whatever it is you got going on, I hope everything is going well. Um, today's video rather is going to be my first one, talking about my political thoughts. And if you checked out my introduction, you would know that I told you that yes, I do consider myself a Democrat, a disciplined Democrat, not your typical Democrat or whatever. So when I talk about politics, you're going to get a liberal slant, with a democratic state of mind coming from an African American man's point of view. So, and again, I know politics is polarizing. You got one side over here, you got one side over there, and you got one side in the middle as well. But we can always have a discussion, even if we agree to disagree. We don't have to threaten each other or do anything close to becoming violent. So today I'm going to give my thoughts on a couple of things, but after I talk about the jobs numbers just briefly, I'm going to focus on my state, Virginia, talk about a few things that's going on. And for those who are in Virginia, maybe you know about some of these things, maybe you don't. And going forward, when it comes to my political videos, I'm going to be way more detailed because when it comes to politics, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. Well, when it comes to politics, the proof is in the content. So I definitely want to make those make those clear before I get started. So again, I hope everyone is doing okay. And this is going to be session one of my political thoughts. First, we're going to talk about the jobs numbers that were released, I believe, on yesterday. So I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. All right. And as you can see, yes, most of the content that I consume in terms of news is from MSNBC. Shouldn't be a surprise there. So I'm just going to let the first few minutes of this particular video play, and then we're going to come back with my thoughts. Let's check this out.
The March jobs report brought more blockbuster news today for the U.S. economy and the president's economic policies. 303,000 net jobs were added to the economy, pushing unemployment down slightly to 3.8%. Wages also continue to rise. They're now up over 4% from where they were this time last year. This is now the...
Okay, did you see those numbers? Did you see that? That's really impressive, but I'm going to continue.
39th straight month of job growth. Unemployment has remained under 4% for 26 straight months. The March jobs report beat expectations by 100,000 jobs. All good news for a president running for re-election. The fastest growing industries this month, healthcare, government, hospitality, and construction, have consistently led job growth in the post-pandemic comeback.
Okay, now I'm going to stop it right there. Now, even though that's 44 seconds, I want to focus on this. Okay, now, that's an impressive track record when it comes to the economy, okay? When it comes to jobs and things like that, that type of growth, I mean, it's unprecedented. And I said this, even if this happened under a Republican president, I would give it props because, I mean, the progress when it comes to that, especially 4 years after the pandemic, is nothing short of amazing. So I'm going to give the Biden administration credit on this, And again, if this was a Republican administration, I would give them credit too, because I mean, you just can't say anything wrong with that. And with that unemployment percentage coming down, that's great. That's great for the country. And then look at these jobs right here. Now, healthcare, government, leisure and hospitality, construction, retail, other services, social assistance. Okay, most of us, quote unquote us, are in these particular industries. So as they continue to grow, I mean, you can't argue with this progression right here. You can't say, or should I say, it wouldn't make any sense to say that there are no jobs when jobs have been created at a consistent rate basically since we came out of the pandemic. Now everybody has their preferences regarding what they like, what they don't like, what jobs they may take, what jobs they may not take. But I mean, the proof is in the content. The proof is in the data here, and this is coming courtesy of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So This isn't some left-wing thing here. This is legit progress right here. And I got nothing but good things to say about it. And speaking of good things, that'll take me to the opposite of this. So this is when, this may ruffle a little feathers, but it's all good. We're all adults here. So I can definitely step in and say this. So now I can imagine what the outcome, or should I say, what the coverage would be if this was happening under Trump. Because you notice that, when during his 4 years, whenever he did something that was remotely good, the mainstream media and everybody would be chomping at the bit and tripping over themselves to give him credit for something, anything to give him credit, but that's neither here nor there. So I could just imagine if this was happening under him, now granted, any self-respecting president would celebrate this progression because these are some good numbers, so it's no issues there. It's just like I said, if the administration was different, then the coverage of it would be different, but that's neither here nor there. But again, these numbers are good. I have nothing but good things to say about it. And before I continue on, getting to the Virginia portion of these political thoughts, I just want to talk to my people for just a brief moment. Now, as the election comes up, I am going to talk more about voting and how essential it is, because with me being a future politician, that's going to be at the top of my list in terms of things that I'm going to run on, or things that I'm going to be in full support of when it comes to, what policies I'm for, what I support, and things like that. So basically, voting rights is going to be at the top of the list. But talking to my people for a moment, I never subscribed to the whole notion that, such and such president didn't do this for Black people, didn't do that for Black people. I've never looked at that as, I never looked at it through such personal lens, because let's face it, no president, from the first one all the way up to the present day, no president at any point is going to be able to do everything for everybody. That's why I never looked at it in such a way, because even to this day, I would still listen to a lot of YouTube videos and read certain articles or whatever that have said Barack did nothing for Black people. Barack Obama did nothing for Black people. Biden isn't doing anything for Black people. Bill Clinton didn't do anything for Black people. Hell, Bush didn't, Trump didn't. I hear it all the time. I read it all the time. But let's face it, no one president is going to do everything for everybody. But like I said, with these job numbers, you can't say that nothing is being done. And like I said, it's, I just never looked at it in such personal lens. And then to further talk about it, then you get into cases where if the Democratic president doesn't do too much, even if they make promises, I get that. And I also get the argument that, the Democrats need to do more. Hell, it's not just the Democrats, the Republicans need to do more. But as we've seen these last several years, the Republicans have done less, and I think we can all see that. We see it in real time. We've been seeing this dating all the way back to the Clinton years, so everybody can do something. Everybody can do more. It shouldn't just be on the Democrats. It should be on everybody. But I get why people are being so hard on the Democrats, because that's the party that's most closely associated with the African-American community. I get that. But at the same time, like I said, everybody needs to do more. And it just doesn't make sense to me to, gravitate towards the Republicans thinking that they're going to do something when in reality, they're going to do little to nothing. And we've seen what they've done in the House of Representatives these last few years, So I just wanted to mention that. And then another thing that I would recommend is that, we as voters and as people, we shouldn't be voting in our emotions as well. Because what you don't want to happen is, if the Democrat gets in, then you want to say, well, I'm going to vote Republican as a way to, either stick it to the Democrats, or you're doing this out of anger or whatever towards the Democratic president. And then if you're going to do that, then each election cycle, you're going to be switching from party to party to party to party. If the Democrats don't act right, you go with the Republican. If the Republican don't act right, then you go with the Democrat. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And it shouldn't be that way. But like I said, I don't want to go too much into it. I just wanted to give my thoughts on that. But like I said, as the 2024 presidential election comes around, then I'm going to do more talking on voting rights and how essential it is and things of that nature. So I just wanted to share that. But again, props to the Biden administration for this consistent um, growth in terms of jobs, and the unemployment rate coming down is not just beneficial towards us, it's beneficial towards the company. And don't get me wrong, I'm for my people, but I don't look at things with um that type of lens. You know what I'm saying? That's basically how it is. So I just wanted to share that with you all. All right, so continuing on here. So next I want to move on to let's see, just 1 second here. All right, so now I'm going to get to Virginia, okay, my state, okay. So as you can see by the title here, amidst ongoing issues, Virginia lawmakers said communication with USPS has been a hard experience. Now, okay, remember a time when it came to the United States Postal Service when you could rely on the mail trucks to deliver your mail in a timely fashion? Remember way back in the day, you could always count on your mail being delivered at 3 or 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. On Saturdays, you would usually get your mail at 12 or 12:30 p.m. And it was always consistent, But then, ironically, in later years, specifically during the Trump years, that's when everything gets turned into disarray. Now, if there were some pressing issues with the post office prior to 2016, I'm not sure. I can't recall if I heard many issues with the post office around that time or not. I just know that it seemed to be exacerbated, when Trump came into office, and that's courtesy of that guy that he selected as his postmaster general. So, and I just want to read this little portion before I get to the Channel 6 article. I just want to read this article, well, a portion of it from commondreams.org. And this was titled Sanders and Senate Dems warn Louis DeJoy don't mess with postal workers or mail delivery. And this was from March 13, 2024. So I just want to read one portion of it. It says, the Board of Governors selected the Postmaster General and appointed Louis DeJoy, a former businessman and GOP donor, in 2020 under former Republican President Donald Trump. Continuing on. Throughout DeJoy's tenure, opponents of his policies to slow mail and hike prices have demanded his ouster. Yes, and they've been demanding for a long time, but based on what I've heard, he's still in this position, and he shouldn't be in this position. What possible reason do you have to want to slow mail and hike prices? I mean, come on. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And based on what I've also heard is that the president even cannot fire this guy. So this has to be something that comes down from the board of directors. Well, not the board of directors. I just had it. The board of governors. Yeah, that's what I meant. They will have to make that call because the president can't unilaterally fire the postmaster general. But I guarantee you that wouldn't stop Trump. If Trump was in office and the postmaster general was somebody that he didn't like, or they didn't support him, or they made some critical comments, he would fire them. And then, of course, it would be a whole firestorm of controversy, and everybody would move on with their lives. There wouldn't be no consequences. But in this case, Joe Biden, just like the majority of Democratic presidents, they act like they got some sense. So, so DeJoy is pretty much going to be in there for the time being. And I would say, had he not been appointed, then the post office wouldn't be having these issues. But, somebody had to come in and make some changes, I guess. And I mean that with all the sarcasm in the world. He shouldn't be in this position. And I remember back in, I think it was either 2018 or 2019, when they had him on Capitol Hill for some questioning. You should have seen just the sense of arrogance and entitlements in this guy. You can tell it in his face, almost like he was too good to be in front of Congress or something like that. And by the way, speaking of Congress, not too much a lot is going on the federal end, but once Congress comes back into session next week, then I'll be talking about more of what's going on the federal end. But like I said, I'm going to focus on my state for these next few articles that I'm going to read. So with that being said, let's get into the first one. right? Okay. All right. Credit to Elizabeth Holmes from WTVR Channel 6. It says, for months, lawmakers have been pushing the U.S. Postal Service to explain why Central Virginia has problems with its mail service. A new audit is now providing some answers, but concerns remain regarding how quickly issues like late, missing, or even stolen mail will be resolved. Imagine that. On Tuesday, Virginia Senator Tim Kaine and U.S. Representative Rob Whitman shared their reaction to the audit after they and other Virginia lawmakers pressed for an internal investigation into operations at the USPS Sandston facility, recently converted into one of the nation's first regional processing and distribution centers. Virginia has been ranked among the poorest in terms of delivery times, late mail, etc., in the last few months, and that certainly matches up with what we've been hearing, Kaine said in a Zoom call with reporters. And again, that goes back to what I said earlier, recalling the time when the U.S. Postal Service was real consistent in their mail deliveries. And ironically, since Louis DeJoy been in that Postmaster General position, it's been chaos. I never thought I would see the day when post office drivers would be delivering mail after 6 p.m. I just never thought I would see that. And post office drivers should not be in a position where they're delivering mail so late. I just never thought I would see that. So continuing on, it was rated as one of the bottom 10 facilities across the United States. Whitman said, pretty incredible. That is pretty incredible for all the wrong reasons. The audit does share some answers, suggesting management and staff at the facility were not ready for it to become a new center serving a larger region. That's interesting. Documents suggest a severe lack of transportation plans and communication with the public, as well as other stakeholders about what the change would look like. And speaking of communication with the public, I believe it was a couple of months ago when someone was requesting that the United States Postal Service, or at least somebody higher up in Richmond, I think, to do like a town hall or a press conference or something along those lines. And the post office said no, they weren't buying it, they weren't for it, which I don't understand that, because if anything, you need to hear from the public when it comes to either mail being lost, mail being stolen, and mail being delivered late. Come on, you do need to communicate with the public in this case, because if it gets worse, then what? And some people will be relying on essential services when it comes to the mail. Anybody can see that. So I digress. Continuing on, it also cites problems that persisted before the change, citing high management turnover and pervasive staffing shortages that were not adequately addressed before the change. I need to go in and converse with regional leadership here and find out, okay, what is the status of employment? How short are you? Kaine said. And I just want to mention one thing real quick. I have worked at the post office before. It was at a location on Brook Road, and I was there for a month. This was from November 2016 to December 2016, and it was basically a temporary thing. They had a lot of mail that was coming in, packages and things like that coming in for the holidays. And, I did my thing, and, I didn't continue because they wanted their employees to work some crazy hours. And at this time, I already had a full-time job. So the hours they were looking for was just crazy. And I always wanted a full-time position at the post office, but it never happened, and quite frankly, I wouldn't work for the post office with Louis DeJoy as Postmaster General. Oh no, now that's me taking a little stance there. But no, as long as he the head, I'm good where I'm at. Continuing on. Both Kaine and Whitman shared frustration regarding how long it took to discover the facility's problems, as well as their communication with lawmakers and the public. I deal with a lot of federal agencies. I take tours of federal facilities all the time. I've never had a harder experience, getting answers, Kaine said. One entity says, no, we're not going to pay attention to our customers. We're not going to listen to our customers. Whitman questioned. Exactly. Kaine shared concerns about how the issues could impact mail-in ballots in the upcoming presidential election, the same thing that happened in 2020. So I hope that doesn't happen, but the concern is real. Keith Ballmer with the Richmond Office of Elections said there haven't been any glaring problems with the U.S. Postal Service getting ballots on time. He is urging voters to make sure they get their ballot in early and drop off mail in person if possible. This is not the election to wait until the end to decide that you want to vote by mail. Unfortunately, because of what we're hearing, Balmer explained, you need to be proactive and you need to be proactive immediately. Balmer said he wants to make sure all election officials are on the same page when it comes to addressing concerns or challenges with voting by mail. What we need to do is ensure that we continue to have dialogue with state officials and with the USPS, Balmer said. Whitman said he and others will stay on it to quell concerns and make sure the postal problems are resolved. Members of Virginia delegation will be laser focused on making sure that they are accountable, that they're transparent in the things that they're doing to address these issues. Whitman said mail carrier safety is also at the top of mind, as Richmond police reported 2 different cases of mail robberies within the past 5 days. Now, if that continues and that gets worse, then people are going to resign or they're going to do something else, because delivering mail is such a vital part of society, and it's been that way for decades. And people, it's already bad that you have to deliver mail after hours, but to have to worry about whether you're going to be robbed or whether your life is going to be in danger, no one wants to deal with that. So again, I digress. Kane suggested mail carriers have body cameras to potentially deter thieves and help solve cases. Now that's interesting. Now coming from a future politician stance, yes, I would be in favor of that. I would be in favor of mail carriers wearing body cameras. And hell, I would be in favor of UPS and FedEx and Amazon workers with body cameras as well. I would be in favor of that. So if there was some type of bill or legislation to come up, I would definitely put in my vote for that. Okay, so issues with the United States Postal Service, hopefully things will get better as the time goes on and not worse. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Louis DeJoy. They need to remove him ASAP, and why he's still in this position, I don't know. But as I continue to talk about politics, from my state, if there are any updates or any additional notable articles that come across my feeds, I'll be sure to talk about them. All right. So moving on to the next one. We still in my state of Virginia. Let's see. Mr. Youngkin, bless his heart. Okay. Before I get to this one, I have an interesting story when it comes to Youngkin. Okay. During the 2021 election, governor's election in Virginia, he was going up against Terry McAuliffe. And basically the consensus at the time was McAuliffe didn't do too much to reach out to not just the Black community, but other voters. Basically, he didn't present a good argument as to why he should have been awarded with a second term. And as a result, Youngkin won. Now, me personally, I didn't want Youngkin to win because it seemed like this guy came out of left field and just won the governorship, and that night I remember for a minute, it was real. I had some anxiety issues because prior to Youngkin, becoming a governor, Ralph Northam, while he wasn't perfect, Ralph Northam was in office. And of course, there was a Democratic House of Delegates and a Democratic Senate. And they got a lot done during Northam's administration. And I was like, man, Youngkin gonna come in and, as usual, when a Republican takes over, they're gonna screw things up. And the next thing you know, the Democrat is gonna have to come back in and clean up their mess. Now I will say this. I said this before and I'll say it again. I don't agree with Youngkin on much, but the one thing that I'll say about him is that at least the guy conducts himself with some dignity. Granted, he does spout some of the same right-wing mess that I don't agree with or don't really have anything to say, but for the most part, the man acts like he has some sense. I give that to him. And even with the next few articles I'm going to read, there's going to be some things that I'm going to agree with in terms of the legislation that he signed, and some things that I'm going to disagree with in terms of his vetoes, But hell, I could be in a room with him and have a conversation or something akin to a conversation, whereas I don't think I would last 5 minutes in a room with Donald Trump, and this is a key difference there, And again, speaking as a future politician, yes, I have no problem being transparent and coming to common ground, and or should I say reaching common ground and coming to compromises with my Republican colleagues. But at the same time, I'm not going to justify anything crazy, and I'm not going to be on the side of an issue that's detrimental to not just my people, but the people in general. Because that's who I'm working for, and that's who I will be working for. Point blank in the story. So, with all that being said, we're going to go to this particular article, courtesy of the Washington Post. Credit to Gregory Snyder and Laura Vazella. Just 1 second here. Okay, all right. So this one is from March 27, 2024, not that long ago. Okay. Part of me wants, let me try something new here. Normally I would read these myself, but let me play the audio and let me see if we can do it that way. Let's check this out.
This news story was written by Gregory S. Schneider and Laura Vazella. Youngkin vetoes assault weapons ban but signs 2 gun control bills. Richmond. Governor Glenn Youngkin has vetoed an assault weapons ban and a slate of other gun control bills passed by the Virginia General Assembly, but he signed a pair of firearm-related measures into law. One bans a device that turns a semi-automatic firearm into a machine gun, and the other allows a parent or guardian to be charged with a felony for allowing a child who has been deemed a threat to have access to a gun. I am pleased to sign public safety bills which are common-sense reforms with significant bipartisan support from the General Assembly, Youngkin, der Republican, said in a written statement. Youngkin had not been tested on firearm-related legislation in the first 2 years of his administration, when Republicans controlled the House of Delegates and prevented all gun control measures from advancing. This year, with Democrats holding majorities in both the House and the Senate, lawmakers sent over numerous bills that put him on the spot. Youngkin had cast himself as a pro-Second Amendment patriot in his campaign for the GOP gubernatorial nomination in 2021. But he also refused to answer a National Rifle Association questionnaire and downplayed guns as he wooed suburban voters who tend to support some gun control.
All right, let me stop right there for a brief moment. Okay, now I'm all in favor of gun control, so giving more thoughts on here. It's never been about taking people guns away. There are some law-abiding gun owners in the country. So I've never been an advocate for taking people guns away. My thing is, when it comes to gun control, I've always supported, things like, background checks, red flag laws, and definitely people who've been convicted of a crime, convicted of domestic violence or DV, things of that nature, and definitely any kind of mental issues, things of that nature. No one like that needs a gun, plain and simple. That's where I come from with gun control. And yes, we don't need weapons of war. We don't need assault rifles, AR-15s. We don't need those on our streets. Civilians do not need to have access to those kind of weapons. So in this case, the one that bans a device that turns a semi-automatic firearm into a machine gun, props on that. That's a good ban. Don't need them. And the other allows a parent or guardian to be charged with a felony for allowing a child who has been deemed a threat to have access to a gun. Again, I agree with that. I agree with both of those signings because parents or guardians need to be held accountable in situations like that. And I remember it was either a year or so ago when a student in Newport News brought a gun to school and the parent was charged and things like that. I remember that. So again, I agree with these, no issues there. So let's continue on.
Youngkin's limits were clear, though, in the batch of 30 vetoes announced Tuesday, which included an assault weapons ban and a measure to close the boyfriend loophole to prevent someone in a domestic relationship who is subject to a restraining order from gaining access to a firearm. The actions bring Youngkin's total vetoes so far this session to 80, nearing the record set by Governor Terry McAuliffe, Democrat, of 120 vetoes in a 4-year term. With more than 1,000 bills sent to his desk when the General Assembly wrapped up March 9th, Youngkin is on pace to set a new mark for rejections.
Okay, now let me step in here. Now, let me see. Okay, now, ban anytime there's a veto of an assault weapons ban, I disagree with that because we don't need assault weapons bans in the hands of civilians. We just don't. There's ways to protect yourself, but you don't need no weapons like that. Now the boyfriend loophole, this is a measure that shouldn't be closed because when it comes to something like that, my thing is when it comes to DV or any type of issues where it's domestic violence or if the person has a history of violence, they don't need to have access to guns. It's that simple, you know. So I wouldn't close a loophole like that, and I hope I'm phrasing that right. In cases like that, no significant other, boyfriend or girlfriend for that matter, needs to have access to a weapon. It's that simple.
The two bills he signed were not opposed by the Virginia Citizens Defense League, a prominent gun rights group, which did not immediately respond to a request for comment. He should have signed all the other bills to keep our children and our loved ones free from firearms violence, said Lori Haas, one of Richmond's most vocal gun control advocates, since her daughter was injured in the 2007 massacre at Virginia Tech. The two Democrats who sponsored identical House and Senate versions of bills to hold guardians accountable for juvenile gun crimes praised Youngkin for signing the measure, which they call Lucia's Law, after Lucia Bremer, a 13-year-old girl in Henrico County who was gunned down by a 14-year-old boy in 2021. Virginia families will be safer now because of Lucia's Law, Della Rodney T. Willett, D. Henrico, who sponsored HB 36, said in a news release. That bill passed the House 55-43, with 4 Republicans joining every Democrat in support. Senator Schuyler T. Van Valkenburg, D. Henrico, who sponsored SB 44, said in the same release that the bill will hold irresponsible and neglectful firearm owners accountable. His bill passed the Senate 27-13, with 6 Republicans joining every Democrat in support.
And again, much props here. I would have voted for this. I would have voted for this legislation, so good decisions on everybody on this one.
Youngkin also signed identical House and Senate bills prohibiting the manufacture, sale, or possession of an auto-sear, a device used to convert a semi-automatic firearm into an automatic weapon. The measures, carried by Senator Russet W. Perry, D. Loudon, and Del Michael J. Jones, D. Richmond, passed both chambers by wide bipartisan margins. In addition, Youngkin offered amendments to 6 gun-related bills. Those included identical House and Senate bills meant to prohibit any person from possessing firearms, other weapons, or explosives in hospitals that provide mental health services. Youngkin's amendment would only prohibit someone from transferring a weapon to a patient receiving mental health treatment.
And like I said before, I understand it to a degree, but again, anyone that has anything resembling mental health issues should not be anywhere near firearms. Again, anyone with any kind of mental health issues should not be in any possession of weapons. It's that simple.
Youngkin's office noted that state law already bans firearms from public hospitals, and that private hospitals have the right to ban firearms from their premises. Haas said private hospital systems had asked for the legislation in its original form because it is hard for them to enforce firearm bans if they are only a matter of hospital policy, not a law that police can enforce. Police can't enforce corporate policy, she said. The only thing the police can do is charge the person with trespassing, and police aren't apt to do that. Youngkin also amended a bill to make it a Class 1 misdemeanor to knowingly possess or sell any firearm with a serial number that has been removed or altered, except for antique firearms. Youngkin's office announced that he changed the bill to align it with federal law and federal definitions of serial numbers. Youngkin also amended identical House and Senate bills related to plastic firearms, which can evade detection in security screenings and are already banned under state law. The new bills would create a separate felony if a plastic firearm is used in the commission of certain other felonies, including rape, robbery, and carjacking. His amendment would increase the mandatory minimum sentence from 5 years to 10. His final amendment was to a Senate bill meant to reduce the risk of school shootings like the one that took place in Newport News in January 2023. when a 6-year-old boy shot and wounded his elementary school teacher with a gun he took from his mother's purse.
That was crazy.
The measure requires school boards to annually notify parents of their responsibility to store any firearms in their homes safely, proposing the same changes that he suggested this month to an identical House bill.
Okay, and again, credit where credit is due. I have no problem with these amendments, and like I said earlier, parents should be held accountable if their child or children gets a hold of weapons that they shouldn't have. And I agree with, sentences when it comes to, firearms in the hands of people who shouldn't have them.
Youngkin attached a reenactment clause, requiring that the bill win passage again next year. He also directed state education officials to create a comprehensive list of parental rights and responsibilities, and come up with the best way to distribute it to parents. His vetoes included House and Senate versions of a bill to ban assault-style firearms, which had been a Democratic priority, and another pair of bills that would have prohibited guns at public colleges and universities.
Hold on. Okay, now another disagreement here. Now, I disagree with vetoing bills that prohibited guns at public colleges and universities. Now, okay, I understand protection, but do we really need a culture or an environment where people are just, gladly opening and carrying, or should I say, carrying guns on college campuses and universities? I mean, do we really need to get to a point like that? Because most people are already paranoid as is, so you don't need institutions of higher learning to be relegated with people just carrying guns. I would be in support of additional security as opposed to letting the students just freely walk around with guns, but that's my stance.
Shameful and unthinking action. Senator R. Cray Deeds, D. Charlottesville, who sponsored his chamber's version of both bills, posted on X. The campus gun ban, SB 383 and HB 454, had been sought by authorities at the University of Virginia following the shooting deaths of 3 football players in a school parking garage in 2022. While I am committed to ensuring well-secured and safe college campuses in Virginia, this legislation does not adequately consider the numerous variations in Virginia's diverse geographic, cultural, and societal norms across different regions of the Commonwealth, Youngkin said in his veto statement. The assault weapons ban always faced little chance of getting past the Republican governor.
No
Democrats failed to pass a version of it, even when they had control of the General Assembly and the Executive Mansion 4 years ago.
I remember
This
that.
year's attempt would have grandfathered in existing weapons to sidestep the problem of having to confiscate a popular style of firearm. But in his veto statement, Youngkin said the Constitution precludes the Commonwealth from prohibiting a broad category of firearms widely embraced for lawful purposes, such as self-defense, adding that he is profoundly troubled by the occurrences of mass shootings and crimes committed with firearms. Youngkin said the solution is stricter penalties for crimes and more funding for mental health services. I think the governor lives in a one-dimensional public safety fantasy land, Senate Majority Leader Scott A. Surrevell, D. Fairfax, said in an interview. My constituents aren't calling me up demanding higher minimum sentences and tough-on-crime policies. I don't know how many more mass shootings we have to have before he gets the message. The vetoes also included HB 585, which would have made it illegal to sell guns from a home less than 1.5 miles from an elementary or middle school. Youngkin said it appeared to be directed at one individual in Prince William County.
Okay, I think I disagree with that particular veto. It should be illegal in this case, especially that close to an elementary or middle school. I disagree with that veto. Let's continue.
HB 797, which would have eliminated certain private training programs for certification to get a concealed handgun permit and required the state to provide a stricter level of training. Youngkin said it would introduce bureaucratic obstacles that impede an individual's right to self-defense.
And again, going back to the gun control thing, I disagree with this as well. I'm all for not just gun control, but you need to put more strict measures in place. It shouldn't be that easy to get a gun, but it's hard. it's hard to get a drink or it's hard to get cigarettes. You see what I'm saying? It never made sense to me. You know, an 18-year-old could get an AR-15 just like that, but that same 18-year-old couldn't walk into a bar and get a drink because the bartenders would be asking to see his ID. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I don't agree with that.
SB 338, which would have required the General Assembly's audit arm, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, or JLARC, to study the social, physical, emotional, and economic health effects of gun violence. Youngkin said this amounted to politicizing the agency and added that it makes no mention of criminology or requires JLARC to look at the benefits of self-defense that firearm ownership can provide. HB 362 and SB 642, identical measures aimed at closing the boyfriend loophole by allowing a judge to bar an intimate partner from possessing a gun after being convicted of misdemeanor assault and battery. Current law only specifies direct family members are subject to gun bans related to domestic abuse. Youngkin said that the term intimate partner is vague and that expanding the law would strain the court system.
Okay, my system froze a little bit there. Let's see. Okay, we know what intimate partner means. It's okay, it may be vague in a sense, but we know what it means. So I would have granted this particular legislation. I would have signed it. I wouldn't have vetoed that. And then every time when it comes to something like this, you know, when it comes to politicize or something, okay, by its very nature, it is going to be politicized because when it comes to these things, the constituents are going to be looking to the lawmakers to do something. So by its very nature, it is going to be politicized, no matter if the issue is a quote unquote Democratic one or quote unquote Republican one. But again, by its very nature, is politicized. So, but okay, man.
Other vetoed measures would have required someone applying to get or renew a concealed handgun permit to supply fingerprints, limited the number of states whose concealed handgun permits are recognized in Virginia, established a waiting period for firearm purchases, required that guns be stored in a locked container in homes where a child is present, and prohibited the possession of a firearm within 100 feet of a polling place, up from the current limit of 40.
Okay, now wow, all of those vetoed measures when it comes to handguns, man, I don't agree with any of those. You know, especially the requirement that guns be stored in a locked container in homes where a child is present. Why veto that? I don't know. You know, and just everything else. I mean, I don't agree with those vetoes. I mean, quite simple, you know, and like I said, I support strict gun control measures. It's not about taking people guns away. It's about making it harder for people who shouldn't have guns to get access to them. It's that simple. For example, you know, I don't want someone with mental issues to be in charge of a weapon. I mean, it's that simple. Okay, so again, you know, it's half and half. You know, the things that he did sign, some of those I agree with, and then when it comes to the videos, some of those I don't agree with, you know, but it's all good, you know. All right, so then we'll move on to the next one. All right, 1 second. All right. Let's see. Okay, this is courtesy of the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Credit to Dave Reese. Youngkin signs bill to crack down on elder abuse and exploitation. All right. All right, let's see. Okay, this one, it may play an ad, so we may have to listen to that until we get to the article.
This audio presentation is brought to you by Hearing Concepts.
One moment, ladies and gentlemen.
Some of Virginia's most high-powered investigative bodies will now be turned loose on people who abuse, neglect, or steal funds from vulnerable adults. Under legislation Governor Glenn Youngkin signed into law, it was among 150 more bills he announced Thursday that he has signed. He has now signed more than 500 and vetoed 91 of the 1,043 passed by the General Assembly this year. He did not veto any in this latest batch of bill actions. Youngkin has until 11:59 p.m. on Monday to sign, veto, or amend bills, including the blockbuster state budget, in which he wants to drop the sales tax expansion approved by the General Assembly. The Elder and Vulnerable Adult Abuse and Neglect Bill empowers multi-jurisdictional grand juries to investigate financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, as well as abuse and neglect of a vulnerable adult.
Okay, now I agree with this. This is a, again, mad props to him for signing this. We need, more strict measures. And in this case, taking action, against those who would try to take advantage of vulnerable adults, older ones, So I agree with this.
The legislation, House Bill 769, sponsored by Del. Carrie Delaney, E. Fairfax, passed unanimously.
That's
Youngkin
good.
also signed House Bill 935 and Senate Bill 118, requiring health plans to cover doula care by women who provide guidance and support to a pregnant woman during labor.
I
This
agree
will
with that.
enhance our efforts to improve maternal health outcomes in the Commonwealth and support access to doula services, Youngkin said. It was among several healthcare measures he announced signing Thursday, including House Bill 353, which says a hospital emergency room must always have a physician present. Current law only requires a physician be on call.
That's a good change right there. With or without the pandemic, that's a good change, because you don't want a physician to just be on call. You do want to have someone present, at all times, basically. And I'm assuming it's at all times because, there are people out there with issues, real health issues. So you want that assistance right there. You shouldn't have to, go through a lot of hoopla, if you will, to get help. So I agree with that. That was a good call.
Other healthcare bills Youngkin signed include House Bill 252 to create a registry of sickle cell anemia patients and to start collecting data about this disease of the blood that predominantly affects African Americans. House Bill 93, directing the Board of Health to add alpha-gal syndrome, an allergy to meat caused by a tick bite, to its list of reportable diseases. House Bill 342, which requires state agencies to keep naloxone or other opioid overdose medication on hand. And House Bill 831, directing the Maternal Mortality Review Team to convene a work group to focus on collecting maternal morbidity data. On consumer issues, Youngkin also signed into law House Bill 744, requiring better notice to consumers of service contracts that automatically renew, as well as House Bill 73 to automatically expunge clearing court orders for repayment of debt if the claim is dropped. Youngkin also signed Senate Bill 645, sparked by Hopewell's longstanding financial stress, that would empower the state to step in if Hopewell or Petersburg need help. He highlighted.
Okay, that's cool right there. Now, as you all know, I was born and raised in Petersburg, and even though I stay in Richmond, I still go back home. I'm still, keyed in, so to speak, regarding what goes on in my place of birth. So that Senate Bill 645, yes, kudos to him for signing that. So I agree with that.
His signing of measures sponsored by two leading Democrats, Delaware, Betsy Carr, D. Richmond, and State Senator Mamie Locke, D. Hampton, House Bill 1125 and Senate Bill 217, that set up the Virginia Business Ready Expedited Permitting Program to speed approval and lower fees for creating sites for businesses to locate. He also highlighted House Bill 1224 and Senate Bill 151, which lower fees for the special identification cards issued by the Department of Motor Vehicles to people with sincerely held religious objections to being photographed. Del. Chris Runyon, R. Rockingham, who sponsored the House measure, has said many of his constituents are old order Mennonites who do not drive cars and do not want their photos taken but who need some form of state-issued ID. Among the 150 bills Youngkin signed was a bill to help former legislators and state elected officials make Virginians happy after they leave office. Senate Bill 175 adds former state legislators, former governors, lieutenant governors, and attorneys general and current or former circuit court clerks to the list of people who can perform a marriage in Virginia without needing a bond or order of authorization.
All right, so
next article.
Hold on.
More resources.
Okay, so in this case, I have no problem with any of these bills being signed. So again, credit what credit is due. He signed some good legislation here, especially the one focusing on sickle cell anemia and how that affects. Let me go back to it so I don't butcher it. House Bill 252 to create a registry of sickle cell anemia patients and to start collecting data about this disease of the blood that predominantly affects African Americans. So I'm good with that particular legislation. Any legislation that further expands on that, I would support it. and then you know, the bill to help former legislators and state elected officials to make Virginians happy after they leave office. Okay, yeah, I would be in favor of that as well, because even though, my plan is to start in the Virginia House of Delegates and then go to the United States House of Representatives, I'm still going to be involved with my state, So again, good call on the legislations here. And again, I don't agree with Youngkin on much, but in this case, I can give him credit. No issues there. And finally, we come to the last article, again, courtesy of the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Despite Youngkin's veto, two-person freight train crews become the rule. This is courtesy of Michael Martz. All right. And now when I think about it, I think because I have a membership, they're not playing the ad. So that's a good thing.
This audio presentation is brought to you by Hearing Concepts. Senator Jennifer Carroll Foy v. Prince William got the final laugh this week when the Federal Railroad Administration approved a final rule to require minimum two-person freight train crews. The move came less than a month after Governor Glenn Youngkin vetoed her legislative proposal to require them in Virginia. At the end of the day, we got it right, Carroll Foy said on Thursday. Youngkin vetoed Senate Bill 143 on March 8, saying, among other things, that the requirement was premature in the face of the federal government's ongoing rulemaking process, suggesting that available evidence does not conclusively support the notion that two-person crews are inherently safer.
I disagree with that, but as this article continues, you'll see why I'm going to disagree.
Less than a week later, he vetoed an identical measure, House Bill 385, proposed by Dell. Shelley Simons, D. Newport News. The federal process ended on Tuesday with a final rule that requires minimum two-person crews on freight trains 14 months after a Norfolk Southern train hauling hazardous cargo derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, prompting evacuation of residents within a 1 by 2 mile radius.
Okay, now, this is why I disagree, because I'm pretty sure most of you listening to this did hear about that incident in East Palestine, Ohio. That was crazy. Thankfully, it didn't turn out to be a bigger catastrophe than what it was, because it could have been worse. Now, I will say this regarding President Biden. I do disagree with him taking so long to go there. He should have been there in a more timely fashion, but I believe other things were going on at that point. I'm not making excuses, but I would have been there as soon as possible. I wouldn't have went there months after the fact. So I do have some criticisms about that. But in this case, I disagree with the vetoes here, because having a two-person crew is going to be more helpful. It's not like you're having a three-person crew. One person should not be the be-all end-all when it comes to freight trains. You definitely want to have a second person there. You don't really need any additional explanation on it. A two-person crew is good. And definitely looking at my state, with all due respect to East Palestine, Ohio, I don't want a derailment like that in my state, So I disagree with that particular veto.
The train was carried.
But kudos to the two delegates. Let's see, Miss Carroll Foy and Shelley Simons. Kudos to them for their measures here.
3 crew members, but U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg said Tuesday, common sense tells us that large freight trains, some of which can be over 3 miles long, should have at least 2 crew members on board, and now there's a federal regulation in place to ensure trains are safely staffed.
I agree with that 100%. 100%.
Youngkin Press Secretary Christian Martinez said the rule makes it crystal clear that this is a federal issue, as the governor said in his veto messages.
No, this is not a federal issue. At least I don't think it is, because if we, God forbid, have a derailment in Virginia, yes, it's going to be a state issue, but also, we're going to be looking to the Department of Transportation for some help as well. So again, I disagree with the vetoes here, man.
Unfortunately, this rule is nearly as bad as the bills he vetoed, Martinez said. The government mandates inhibit the development and implementation of technology, impose constraints on our supply chain, and drive up costs on consumers and increase inflation.
This has nothing to do with an increase in inflation, and it would not impact the consumers. I disagree with that
Carol
too.
Foy saw the new rule as vindication after Youngkin's veto of her legislation, which had passed the Democratic-controlled General Assembly on party-line votes in both chambers. Just a quick word from our sponsor.
For more than a decade, Hearing Concepts has been dedicated to enhancing the auditory experience for our patients. As a locally owned practice, we provide comprehensive hearing healthcare services to the Glen Allen community.
It's all about protecting our workers and protecting our communities, she said. Youngkin vetoed the bill the day before the General Assembly was scheduled to adjourn. He issued a statement that called the legislative mandate a blunt regulatory tool that encroaches upon the established mechanisms for railroads and unions to negotiate staffing and scheduling matters through collective bargaining. The Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen said it had long sought a federal rule to require at least one certified engineer and one certified conductor aboard freight trains. We also have repeatedly tried to reason across the bargaining table for railroads to adopt these minimum staffing requirements, said Edward A. Hall, the union's national president, in a statement on Tuesday. As these trains, many carrying hazardous materials, have grown longer, crews should not be getting smaller.
Exactly. Those are some good points right there.
Ian Jeffries, president and CEO of the Association of American Railroads, accused the Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, of doubling down on an unfounded and unnecessary regulation that has no proven connection to rail safety. The victory could be temporary, with an election rematch looming between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, who was in office in 2019 when the FRA dropped a similar proposal to require minimum two-person crews on freight trains. 2 Ohio senators introduced bipartisan legislation last year to require train crews of at least 2 people as part of their proposed Railway Safety Act, but it has not advanced in the Senate. No one wants a miles-long train barreling through their community with only one operator.
Right.
Brown said after the government released the rule on Tuesday. This is an important first step to protect communities, but we must pass the Railway Safety Act to make trains carrying hazardous materials safer and ensure railroad lobbyists can't roll back the two-person crew rule in the future.
Exactly. Now,
Next article.
More resources to prepare.
Hold on. Okay, again, putting my future politician hat on again. That Railway Safety Act, I would vote for it based on everything that you just heard here. Also, yes, ensure that railroad lobbyists can't roll back the two-person crew rule in the future. Yes, definitely. Yes, I would vote for this legislation. And as we're at the end of the article, just when it comes to the East Palestine derailment, just take a look at these photos here. I mean, look at that. Look at that. And no state wants to see that, but I'm talking about my own state. With all due respect, I don't want to see a derailment like that here. Just look at this. That's all from the train derailment. And like I said, thankfully, nobody was hurt and it wasn't any serious injuries. It could have been much worse, but thankfully it wasn't. Look at that. No one wants to see that in their state. And not trying to make light of it, but this is something that you would see in the movie. You don't want to see this in your own hometown. Interesting. But like I said, thankfully it wasn't. Thankfully it didn't turn out to be worse. So, wow. So that was a lot there. But yeah. So that's what's going on. From job numbers to the United States Postal Service to the General Assembly, to trains, planes, and automobiles, and getting everything in line in terms of healthcare coverage. We covered that and then some on the first session of My Political Thoughts. So like I said, next week when Congress comes back in session, you can rest assured that I'll be back with another session of, or should I say, I'll be back with the second session number 2 of My Political Thoughts. I'm still new here, guys, so just bear with me. So on that note, we come to the end of this particular video. Let me know what you guys think, especially if you're in Virginia, if you're in the 804 area. Let me know what you think about these vetoes and the signing of the legislation, as well as what's going on with the post office, as well as the job numbers. Let me know what you think. And even if you're not in Virginia, let me know your thoughts on here. What's coming up next on the channel? I do plan to get out the second part of the Trump effect pretty soon. my next top 10 MC series, which is going to be KRS-One. I'm going to get to that pretty soon. I'm still trying to determine what I'm going to do with the Monday Night War seasons. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But, you know, in addition to that, I hope you like this video. And if you do, please give us some comments, like it, share it. And also, if you want to become a member of Team Discipline, I welcome you to do so. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And until next time, people, take care. And remember, the power of the mind is valuable.